When trying to determine which route to take when creating your own private trust, the one key to look for is simplicity. So there's a principle called Occam's razor, which states that if you have two competing ideas that explain the same phenomenon, you should always try and go with the simpler solution. And so when we look at this idea of, going private, the idea is partly to, get exempt from taxes and, have way more freedom, not have to jump through all these hoops. So at the end of the day, part of why you're doing it is to simplify your life. And the opposite of that is the realm of the devil, where everyone's on these marionettes dancing to all these complex rules and codes in this big fat handbook. And as people are making that exit, there's a natural Stockholm syndrome that develops in every case, where you're just used to complexity. You're used to all these, obfuscating layers and just all this shit going on. And so it feels very scary and feels very strange to simplify as much as you probably should be doing. And even as you start researching the world of private trust and you're trying to find which one is best, same thing. A lot of these trust strategies seem very complicated, and it seems like, oh, you need this PMA over here to own this, and then you need a trust, and then you need the church, and then all these different things work together somehow. And typically when you see diagrams like that, where you have all these different things working together, that's right there a red flag of how you know you're doing it wrong. And particularly if you're trying to make a change into the private realm and it sounds complicated to you, then again, whoever's trying to push you in that direction, it's probably the wrong direction to go in. So, this trust is incredibly simple in that it is a templated document. You fill out a few blanks within it, and then once you notarize it, that's the creation of the actual trust. And there's different steps after that to actually open up accounts and actually use it. But in terms of the creation of the actual trust itself, it's extremely simple and can literally be done in, a few minutes in one afternoon. So why is it that all these people who talk about private trusts, why do they make it so complicated? And it's because typically they're steering you in the wrong direction. It's just really that simple. There's people that use fancy terms like, exclusive equity and, I can't even remember like all these different things about, things that just don't matter, basically. And also I've heard many, so-called trust people talk about, oh, you have your 508 and it owns this LLC and then it owns this. And already wrong. Like, you shouldn't be having one private entity own a public entity, because what's the point of that? Like, why would you drag yourself back into public jurisdiction when, if at all possible, you keep it simple and keep it private and, not have any of these unnecessary layers? So, it's not just from an efficiency standpoint. It's from the sake of saving your energy and the precious time and life that we have left, your goal, should be, at least in this process, to simplify the way you operate. Less rules, no taxes, no jumping and dancing through all these complex hoops every year and then having to do it all over again. And in that simplicity, the most simple and clear path that I've seen is the one that we use in our community. And if you're curious about that, you can see the link in the description below and jump in there. And we go over the step-by-step process that literally hundreds of people in there have actually used to do this trust and to protect all their assets and, free themselves from all the different hoops and the complexity of the matrix. Lawyers and accountants will have you believe that it has to be complicated, that it has to be, that you need them, for their help. But really, it can be incredibly simple. But you need to follow a proven process, and a process that's been done before and that works in an absolute sense, not a probabilistic sense. Because that's the other place where people go wrong and where it is also complicated. LLCs and all these other different tax strategies, they only limit your protection and they limit your liability. And so what that means is you need to take all these extra layers and extra steps to confuse any potential attackers by having this big diagram that's incredibly confusing and incredibly costly to maintain. And your hope is that anyone trying to get after your assets will be so confused that they hopefully won't get anywhere. At least that's what I've seen most lawyers and accountants and tax strategists try and do. But here's the reality. When you have the right trust that's written in the correct way, it gives you absolute protection with just one trust, one document, that's it. And that is the Occam's razor to this solution. It's a 9-page document, which is much simpler than some really complex, convoluted trusts I've seen, and really much simpler than most other, almost any other corporate document that I've ever seen. And the other key thing about this document that really got me invested in it was that it's a non-violent document. That's why it's ecclesiastical in nature. We're following God, we're following the common law, we're not trying to harm anyone. And it states that explicitly in this document. I've never seen another corporate document that actually bothers to explicitly state that. So, as you're doing your research, part of the discernment that you need is to stay away from complexity. Any teacher that you see out there, if they're trying to teach something that's complex and they make it even more complicated, then you should know that should be a red flag to stay away from any of that material. And there are many fake teachers, fake gurus, and trust demons floating around out there where if you're watching this, you're probably seeing stuff from them. And part of how you know this path that I'm suggesting is the correct one is Occam's razor. It is so incredibly simple to do this, and all the education that we have and that we talk about encourages that simplicity. It doesn't encourage different layers. It doesn't encourage learning all kinds of fancy gobbledygook terms. It encourages getting your first trust open and getting shit done, getting your life protected, your body protected, your soul protected, and then getting all your other assets protected. So if you want to go through that process where we make it as simple as possible, I look forward to seeing many of you in our community. And for the rest of you, good luck. I hope that you can take the necessary steps to get rid of your Stockholm syndrome, because you love the complexity and you love it because everyone else around you loves it. The lawyers love it, the accountants love it because they get to charge their fat fees and charge them again and again year after year. And then there are all these other public agents and all these other intermediaries in the matrix that also benefit from you being stressed out and from you being lost in this morass of complexity. If you actually simplified your life, you'd have more of your precious life energy to focus on what matters, to focus on your family and to focus on the people that you're serving. So I hope to, help you and see you on that journey towards simplicity. And for the rest of you, good luck, because, this world, this game that we're in, it is very complicated. There's no doubt. But part of the solution to that complexity is trying to distill it and trying to make it as simple as possible. So I look forward to seeing many of you on this path, and I'll talk to you all in the next one.